Hello and welcome to day 7 of Women in Antiquity. Today we're going to be talking about Archaic Greece and all the tremendous amount of changes that are already starting to take place in this period of Greek history and how they relate to our overall topic of gender in antiquity. So, as we've already seen, the periods of Greek history, we've already covered the Bronze Age, the Dark Age, and with the recovery of writing, we are now moving into the Archaic Age, the period in which all the transformations that Greece has already been undergoing during this period of recovery and reformation emerge into the light for us who are studying the Greeks in retrospect. This is a period that endures during a very critical period in which the Greek world is expanding tremendously in terms of the strength of their economy, their population, and the ways in which they are shaping their society and their culture. The roots of this, as we've already seen, are in the Dark Age. And so this is a period of continued expansion, accelerated expansion, that builds toward the period of ferment, the period of radical exploration of what it means to be Greek during the classical period. The groundwork for the Archaic period is laid by the cultural interconnections that are made between the isolated and growing communities of the Dark Age, the cultural connections that are laid by the shared heritage, the shared language, interconnections by trade, and interconnections by a song. The epic poetry, the rhapsode that's commemorated in the Iliad and the Odyssey, amongst other things. As we've already seen, this epic poetry, this cultural connection, is through literature, through storytelling, through song, lays the foundations for the Greek attitude of the relationship between the mortal and the divine. Through the works of Homer, the advent of the Greek alphabet, of the recovery of writing in the Greek world, only tremendously solidifies the importance of Homer's story as it is passed from town to town and city to city, from generation to generation, as it becomes the foundation for Greek learning. It becomes the access to literacy. It becomes the essential doorway into the Greek language itself, for the children who are being educated, and it becomes the framework for the understanding of everything, philosophy, and literature and society, and even warfare. So what can we see about the transition from the Dark Age? The transition from the Dark Age, as usual, there is commemoration in ceramics because ceramics doesn't rot. And so we have a visible sign of the shift away from the Dark Age into the period that we call the Archaic. And this is shown in ceramics in moving beyond the geometric style that we saw in the last lecture, the abstract designs that were the hallmark of the Dark Age, and instead we're seeing an elaboration of that. We're seeing the innovation of storytelling in ceramic decoration, and this is storytelling that is contemporary. This is storytelling that is not just mythology, but it is present day as well. The urn that we're looking at is, for example, clearly a story, a commemoration, a memory of the funeral of an important person that included the assembly of people of many houses, and children and animals. It includes the memory of a parade of soldiers and chariots. This is a leader who was a a chieftain and a warlord, somebody who is comparable to the heroes that we see in the Odyssey. This is, the late Dark Age, early Archaic version of, Odysseus. And as we've already seen, with the beginning of the Archaic period, we see an additional voice that balances Homer and also exemplifies the transition that is taking place. Homer is very much emblematic of the Dark Age and of the heritage from the Bronze Age that leads into it. Homer is epic poetry telling grand stories of major themes of society. But Hesiod is more personal. Hesiod is more subjective. Hesiod is more about the individual response to the transformations of the community, and this is one of the things that's typical of this new period that we've entered into. There are essentially three or four key elements of the transformation of the Archaic period. Three things that characterize the emergence of Greek society into the Archaic period. As I said, the foundations for these are laid in the Dark Age where we can't see them, but they come into the light fully formed at the dawn of the Archaic period, and so we talk about them now. The first of these is the polis, the Central Greek form of the city-state. The polis is a city-state like we saw in Sumer, and in Mesopotamia, a place like Babylon or Uruk that is centralized and focused on an urban center plus the surrounding farmlands that feed it, that create a single economic system. And so is economically independent, able to feed itself and produce what goods it needs to take care of its own infrastructure and its own development and growth. A city-state is normally even in rivalry with other city-states in the surrounding area, as we saw in Sumer, for example. The city-states of Sumer have their own identity and their own sense of rivalry with the other city-states, not just a rivalry for essential resources that are limited in the difficult environment of Sumer, but a rivalry to be a strong and capable Sumerian city. Another hallmark of city-states in general is that they generally have patron deities. So we saw, for example, with Babylon, that Babylon has a single patron deity that is one of the gods of the Mesopotamian pantheon. The Babylonians worship all of the gods of the Mesopotamian pantheon, but their patron deity, the one that they turn to, the one that they build a temple for, the ziggurat, the one that lives among them, is Marduk. And Marduk is part of their focus. The part of the purpose of this gigantic ziggurat, this gigantic temple in the center of the city, is a visible focus for the identity, for the sense of self that's bound up in the city and bound up in the city's god. These are all things that are true of city-states in general. The polis is this and more. And so the Greek polis, the Greek city-state, is economically independent and self-sufficient. It is in rivalry with the other city-states for resources. It has its own fierce and centralized identity. It has its own patron deity that helps to focus that identity. the but the polis is a particular kind of city-state. The polis is a city-state that is formed by a process that's called synoicism. Basically, all of these Dark Age farming communities are as the economy grows in the Dark Age, as Hellas recovers at a record-setting pace, these farming villages coalesce and connect and develop into a collection of settled communities that has a single heart, a single marketplace, a great open space at the center of the built-up urban area, which is called the Agora. And the Agora is not just a marketplace. It is part of that central focus. It is a part of that shared, centrally focused identity. The people of this emerging community, as they look inward, they come into the polis. They create their social bonds there. They come to the Agora every day, not just to trade, but to interact, to connect. The festivals that they share in honor of the gods begin and end there. Their public life is practiced there, teaching and lawmaking, and the actions of the citizens and everyone else, all are focused in the Agora. And so the part of the process of the formation of the city-state is how it moves along this dynamic between the local and the center, between the family and the community. Because for the polis to be successful, the identity has to shift away from the town, away from the village, away from the local family and clan to the center. And this process is long and difficult, but it accelerates during the Archaic period, and the way in which the identity forms, the way in which each city evolves, has to do with its own unique vision, its own unique sense of what its identity is and what its ideal is. Each polis has its own sense of what it is and what it can be, and it pursues this vision independently of all of the other Greek cities. So that as the polis develops, it develops its own personality, its own sense of its own future, of what it needs to accomplish, and the things that it needs to do to push itself toward these goals. And so this is by the end of the Archaic period, we end up with polis. The polis is the plural of polis. We end up with polis that are radically different from each other across this broad spectrum, each of them pursuing the ideal, each of them striving for arte as a community, but each of them with a unique and separate and widely varying sense of what it means to be the ideal community, what it means to be the ideal Greek. Ultimately, this leads to Athens and Sparta being at extreme ends of radical experimentation in the effort to pursue what it means to be Greek. So much so polarized, so opposite from each other, across this long spectrum of the hundreds and hundreds of Greek polis, that they end up deeply mistrusting each other's vision and come ultimately to see the other city's vision as being a threat to Greece itself. That's the foundation for the great and horrible war between Athens and Sparta, the Peloponnesian War that takes place in the heart of the classical period. Another thing that's characteristic of the polis is that as the Greeks emerge from the Dark Age, they get rid of their kings and chieftains. They see it as incompatible with the sense of of responsibility and freedom that each a citizen has for driving the community toward the ideal. And so to be ruled over by one man. And so instead, each city is is governed by magistrates, by elected officials. But again, the extent to which these magistrates represent the will of the few or the will of the many varies radically across the spectrum of Greek polis. In place of the king of the basileus, of the great chieftains of the Dark Age, we have two competing senses of who is sovereign, what group is ultimately responsible for the community of the polis. The first of these is the nobles, the elders, aristoi. They refer to themselves as the aristoi. Aristoi means the best. Aristoi means those who are superior. And they believe themselves to be superior according to two things. One is their ownership of larger amounts of property, which gives them a greater stake in defending and growing the community. And the second is because education in the ancient world and, for most of the history of humanity up until very recently, education belonged to the wealthy, those who could afford it. And so the families of the nobility, of the aristoi, believed that they were uniquely qualified to lead and guide their cities because they are educated, because this is something that has been handed down from father to son, generation to generation, the knowledge and skill of leading a community. At the same time, emerging even stronger across the period of the Archaic is the sense that the people, the masses, the demos, are sovereign as well, and they believe that they are the ones that are entitled to lead themselves and to guide their own future. This is the entitlement, the responsibility, the duty and freedom of the Greek citizen. And so, for decisions to be made for them by the rich and powerful, to the masses seems like a betrayal of the freedom that each and every Greek believes in. And so the result is that the polis is characterized by this tension between the few and the many, the aristoi and the demos. And this tension, this friction, is one of the things that drives the polis. A change in the ancient world, change in history in general, is driven by friction. If everything is smooth and remains the same, then things don't change. Friction, either introduced from within or from without, is the agent of challenge to what is known and understood. It is the agent of transformation. And the Greek polis has the friction built in. It is inherent in the tension between the aristoi and the demos. And this is one of the reasons why, if you ask yourself, if you look at the rapid transformation of the Greek world, especially Athens, which undergoes a constant series of mutations until it arrives at radical experimental democracy. If you ask yourself how that happens, why that transformation takes place so extremely and so rapidly, part of the reason is that the polis is the tension inherent to its structure. Because the Greeks believe in the pursuit of the ideal form of culture, they believe in fostering it and patronizing it, and so the wealthy of the Archaic period, we see them practicing what we call the Symposion, where there's regular meetings of in which people drink a great deal of wine and watch poetry being performed, or history being related, or dancing. These sort of private performances are part of encouraging expression. And this encouragement of expression leads to larger instances of artistic expression, new forms of expression, including lyric poetry and drama, which we'll be talking about soon. Second major characteristic of the Archaic period is the emergence of the Hoplite army. The Hoplite army is an army that consists of instead of the battles of the Iliad and the Odyssey are characterized by single combat between heroes, and so you see the battles being described in the Iliad, especially, consist of individual members of each side encountering each other in battle, and fighting to the death. The most famous and instance of this is the single combat between Achilles and Hector, that leads not only to Achilles defeating Hector, but in his hubris, Achilles drags Hector, with his chariot around the walls of Troy 3 times, to make not only Hector's humiliation absolute, but that of his family as well. All of that belongs to the past. This single combat is combat between heroes, between members of the upper class. Hoplites are ordinary citizens. All they have to they only have to be rich enough to afford their shield and spear, and the rest of their equipment. The Hoplite army consists of men of the middle class and upper class, and so as a much broader swath of Greek society, it shifts the center of gravity away from the few and toward the many. The emergence of the Hoplite army as being the characteristic military force of the Greek world is part of the transition from the preeminence of the aristocracy toward the empowerment of the many. Also, the Hoplite army is extremely effective. Its organization is according to the phalanx, which has a long row of men standing shoulder to shoulder. They're these big round shields overlapping, so that they become this irresistible force, which is very long side to side and 8 men deep, with the spear. Usually, the spear is directed underneath the shield. So that when you encounter the enemy, you first impale them, and then you crush them with this massive collective force. And this is hugely effective against any kind of inferior army that's less well trained, less well equipped. It's also very effective against other hoplite armies. And in terms of society, each member of this phalanx is identical, is anonymous. The individual is pursuing glory only collectively. And once again, this reinforces the empowerment of the many, and of the ideal Greek as being part of the community, and not so much an individual seeking individual name and preeminence. Well, the third major characteristic of the Archaic period is colonization. We have two factors combined to lead to this outflowing of people from the Aegean world. The first is the Greek economy grows rapidly across the Dark Age and the Archaic period. And ancillary to this is a huge population expansion. But the Greek world, the Greek mainland of Peloponnese, and most of the islands of the Aegean are not all that terribly fertile. They don't support large populations beyond a certain amount. The valleys between the mountains and so forth are limited in their ability to support growing populations, and so there is an urgent need to export populations out into the rest of the world. And these colonies provide new opportunities for people to be at the heart of society instead of on the fringe, as they are part of the this new founding mechanism, and to control distant resources. The Greek colonies have a sort of unique relationship with the with the homeland. Each Greek colony is founded by a single polis, and it maintains a connection between the colony and the polis, which is very important for trade. The raw materials that come from wherever the colony has been settled tend to be directed toward the mother city. If the colony undergoes any problems, it calls upon the mother city to help to resolve those problems. And so the interesting thing about this is that Greek culture, Hellas, expands outward from the Aegean along with this population. The colonies remain culturally connected to their homeland. So, for example, we're looking at Posidonia, which is on the northern coast of Africa, and we see two different temples, one from the 5th century and one from the 6th century. The architecture, the culture, the sense of Greekness is linked, is constantly being maintained. And is the same in the colonies as it is back at home. One of the expressions of Greek culture that we see during this period is the kouros. These are individual commemorative statues that are that are often seen at grave sites of young men. Usually, they're not very large. So they're sort of like halfway between statues and figurines, and generally they exhibit sort of like ideal characteristics. The earliest of these kouros figures show influence from the east, from Mesopotamia and Egypt. And so the presentation of the figure is very much in the stiff and formal mode that we're used to seeing, especially in Egyptian sculpture. So the two figures that we see on the right, the figure in the center, you probably recognize as being an Egyptian figure, and the figure to the right of that is an early form of the kouros, which has a very similar formal pose. But as things proceed further, the Greeks, take their own way of expressing, the ideal, and this expression is more loose, more liberated, more vivid, more defined. So in both the sense of motion, the sense of vibrancy in the limbs, in the body, and the expressiveness of the face, the delineation of the muscles, all of these are the artist's way of pursuing the ideal male form. There's also a female form, and the female form, like the male form, is designed to present an idealized form of the Greek young woman. And so, this is exhibited in terms of dress, in terms of demeanor, in terms of the physique, just as with the man. And so we see attributes. If you look at the figure here, what we're seeing here is the same figure. The form that we have it in a close-up of the face, and then on the right, the painted form as it would originally have been. Greek sculptures, if you don't know this, Greek sculptures were originally painted and decorated. The pure white version that we have now is the result of long years of exposure, the loss of paint and dress and ornament, leaving it with the pure marble form. The Greeks and the Romans, did not have this pure white form. But anyway, so we're seeing characteristics being expressed here, characteristics of pleasantness, of modesty, of someone who is is pleasant and demure, but not necessarily shy and retiring either. This is the expression that's being captured here is one of lively interest and even engagement. The dress that we see here is one of two forms. That this is so this is the one form that covers up to that has a blouse that covers up to near the neck, and then we see the second form that drapes like a chiton, that is characteristic of a different kind of exposure. Of course, there would be a thin undergarment, so that we're not talking about actual. But the drape of the dress here is once again representative of the community that this dress is characteristic of, and so we see again sort of pleasantness and good humor and engagement, as well as a certain kind of strength that is sort of a female counterpart to what we see in the male. The male, it's easy to represent, strength in the male by emphasizing the musculature. In the woman, these are not figures that are tiny or delicate. These are figures that are strong in a way that is feminine and actively engaged in their community. You may want to look for yourself and maybe look up the Cora figures to see some more examples. You may have your own ideas as to what you're seeing these figures. You don't have to take necessarily my interpretations, but this is part of the point: is to take a look at imagery and try to get a sense of what the creator of this imagery is trying to depict, and what the audience is how the audience is reacting, how the viewer of the time would react to these images. Another innovation in expressive form during the Archaic period is lyric poetry. So epic poetry is characteristic of the Dark Age. It is grand and sweeping and covers the mores of an entire society. It is also like the Iliad and the Odyssey from the top down, concentrating on the greatest and mightiest of heroic figures. Lyric poetry is an innovation of the Archaic period, and it is subjective and personal and intimate. It has to do with a single bond, a single connection between oneself and another figure. a single reaction to the things that a person has around them, things that might not even be made visible, things that reside in the heart and are part of the complexity of our relationship with that which is around us. This personal and subjective form of expression is part of the emphasis that the Archaic period has on ensuring that expression takes place in ways that challenge, that redefine. If a society is interested in protecting what it believes in, then it would stick to something like epic poetry that reinforces the mores that have been taught from generation to generation, and the dangers of self and hubris. But the Greeks are looking to instigate progress and evolution, and they seem to know that to do this must happen through the expression of new ideas and the acquisition of new knowledge. And this is something that is happening in various ways as part of what the Greeks understand to be shared amongst all of these independent and rivalrous communities. The Archaic period sees the collective sense of belonging to Hellas, even though the people of each polis would see themselves as belonging to that polis, but they would see the polis as belonging to the ultimate, stage, the ultimate, fielding ground for the creation of the greatest society in the history of humanity. And all those who are not a part of this, all those who are not a part of Hellas, are barbaroi, are enslaved to kings and emperors, are people who are living under the benighted kingdom of a condition of having their freedom denied them. One of the most fully formed polis of the Archaic period is Sparta. Sparta pursues the concept of the ideal with an incredibly narrow focus. Very early on, the Spartans, because they conquer and enslave the people that live in the place that they settle, in Laconia and in the southern Peloponnese. From the very beginning, the Spartans see the Greek ideal as being the ultimate warrior, the ultimate hoplite warrior. And so the Spartans, from their very beginning, pursue a completely militarized society. They conquer Messenia and Laconia, and the people that live there become systematized into the manufacture of the ultimate warrior people. They become essentially enslaved to the Spartans and become cogs in the creation of the Spartan machine. Sparta itself is even more isolated than many other Greek communities. It is well inland. It is surrounded by mountains, and so trapped in this very narrow valley. Even the river that flows through it is relatively minor, and so not ideal for trade and traffic. The Spartans look within themselves and to themselves, unlike the Athenians that become very cosmopolitan and do a great deal of trade and have large numbers of foreigners and large numbers of foreign goods and foreign ideas teeming in the streets of Athens. Sparta is alone at itself. And so what emerges is this system whereby the Spartan is bred and trained and molded into the ideal warrior, and this becomes more and more so generation after generation until the Spartans know nothing else, can think of nothing else, believe in nothing else. At the top of their society are the only Spartans, the warrior elite, the homoioi. Homoioi means men of equal status. These men are all the same. They are a hoplite army, and yet they are also the nobility. They are the entire citizen body reduced to the few at the top of society. Below that are the people that do everything else. The periokoi, the people that live in and near the city of Sparta that are not Spartans themselves, do all of the other skilled labor that the Spartans require, masonry and metalworking and carpentry and so forth and so on, textile working, all of the things that are necessary to support this, but they are not Spartans. They just make possible what the Spartans can do. Even more so, the Helots, the enslaved inhabitants of Laconia and Messenia, they massively outnumber the Spartans on the order of 5 or 7 to 1, and yet they have no status in society other than simply to feed the Spartan warriors. And this is so, the Helots take care of the land and the farms and the production of agricultural goods so that the Spartan, the Spartan warrior, the homoioi, doesn't have to worry about anything other than training for war and war itself, the art of war. And so for a Spartan, for a true Spartan, the homoioi, for a Spartan warrior to do anything else but war comes to be a betrayal, comes to be a form of heresy almost. This is why the Spartans have no literature. The Spartans have no historians, they have no poets, they have no architects, because to do any of these things is to be something other than what it means to be the ideal Greek. It's to work against the Spartan pursuit of an ideal society. It is to be un-Spartan. It is to turn your back on everything that Sparta is. And so almost everything that we know about Sparta comes from the mouths and pens of outsiders, Athenians mostly. The Spartans have very few slaves, actual slaves. The Helots are actually serfs in the sense that they are bound to the land, and they give a fixed quantity of their produce to a specific warrior. Each Helot family is bound to a specific warrior. After that, they keep what they produce to feed themselves and to trade at local markets and so forth. So this makes them a serf. Slavery is increasingly widespread through Greek society, but the Spartans have little need for it. Most of what slavery is used for in Athens, for example, is domestic servants to show status of your family over the other families of the aristocracy. But in Sparta, all of the families are the same. Everybody every Spartan citizen is the same, and so there is no status of family or individual. Slaves are also used for the harvesting of large estates, but all of that is taken care of by the serfs, by the Helots. The third major use for slaves in the Greek world is for mining, and the Spartans don't have a lot of mineral resources. They end up, purchasing whatever they need, and so they don't have much need for that either. The Spartans pursue the ideal Greek warrior in every way, including the perfection of the physical body. So, a representation of a man, of a male form like this, if it were a representation of somebody from any other community, it might be, artistic license, the artist pursuing the male ideal. But the Spartans actually looked like this. They trained their whole lives. Their physical bodies are part of their manifestation of the ultimate hoplite warrior. They begin this process at a very young age. At age 7, they are separated from their mothers, and they go to live and train in the barracks. And there's a process by which they are trained in a one-on-one way that includes an intimate personal bond between an older male soldier and a younger male soldier. And this is, an extension and exaggeration of the general sense of how culture is passed on in the Greek world. It is through the personal and intimate and erotic bond between an older man and a younger man, a protege. That the older man communicates what he has achieved, what he has accomplished, what he has striven for. He passes that on to the younger man as a means of passing what he has in the present into the future. This is the bond between Achilles and Patroclus that we see in the Iliad. And the death of Patroclus that takes place because of Achilles' stubborn pride is a tremendous tragedy, not only for Patroclus, but also for Achilles, because the transmission of all that he is into the future has been cut off. And in a sense, what he is, what he has become, has been made meaningless because it ends with him. The upshot of all this emphasis on creating the ideal soldier is that the Spartan woman is often left to manage the ordinary things of the household that a husband would participate with. And so property management and household management is often in the hands of the Spartan woman. The Spartan man is in the barracks from age 7 to age 30 and can still be off at war for extended periods beyond that. And so the Spartan woman emerges as being somewhat more free and having more of a participation in the public aspect of society. The other side of this is the other reason that Spartan women seem to have a little bit more equality with men is that the Spartans are actively engaged in a eugenics project. They are attempting to breed successively stronger and better warriors. They want to ensure that each child born, especially the male children, are strong and healthy and prepared to take on the burden of fighting for Sparta. And so the Spartans believed that both parents need to be not only healthy but physically strong and physically trained in order to produce a child that is physically strong. And so Spartan women receive physical education as well as some schooling, so that they can be as strong as possible a contributor to the children that are produced. This is the side effect of this too is that any children that are produced by the Spartans, by the Homoioi, by the warrior elite, that are not ideal, that have some sort of birth defect or, are sickly or whatever, are rejected. This is the process of exposure, which we'll be seeing more about later. And, in other societies, exposure, infanticide, is more prevalent with girl babies because, boy babies are generally assumed to be more valuable in working the farm, in furthering the bloodline, so forth. In Sparta, infanticide is going to be practiced, with boy children or girl children if they are physically deficient. Infanticide doesn't always mean death. The normal practice is to leave a baby exposed in the wilderness on a hillside or whatever, and put the fate of that child in the hands of the gods. And, it often happens that these children are found and raised by, families of a lower class. And so the actual death rate among children that are exposed is less than, the full number of children that are rejected. Spartan marriage, again, an interesting side effect of this society. Normally, in Greek society and Roman society especially, we'll see that marriage is about bonds between families that are jockeying for importance and preeminence within the nobility. And so marriages end up being arranged to the benefit of the families that are involved, and not necessarily between two people that are actually interested in marrying each other or even like each other. Marriage is a social contract between families. The actual two parties that are getting married are only minimally involved in most of the Greek world, in the Roman world. In Sparta, once again, the families are all equal. The members of the homoioi, there is no relative status. They are all at the same level, theoretically speaking. And so this means that marriage on the whole is about something else. It's about procreation, and it is about the physical connection, including emotional connection between two people. The complication of this is that the male is normally confined to the barracks most of the time, and so they're not spending huge amounts of time with each other, but they visit each other often enough to produce children. And so marriage in Sparta is something unique to the Greco-Roman world. Okay, so the readings for today, very quickly: the Pomeroy and the Dark Age and the Archaic periods. This is one of Pomeroy's areas of expertise, and so she's going to be. Asserting her take on the Archaic period, and particularly on things like the Spartan woman, in a way that's quite assertive. So make sure that you're thinking about what she's saying. Take her expertise, for what it is worth, which is immense. She spent her whole life studying these things, but also don't take it at face value. Think about your reactions to what it is that she's arguing, and what you think about what she's trying to say. Hesiod works in days. So Hesiod works in days has some is mostly advice for an individual, a family member who is more prodigal than Hesiod himself, who wasted his inheritance, is now looking for support. And Hesiod is saying, this is how you need to live your life. You need to live it frugally, and with an eye toward what is sensible. What is the best way to go about having a farm, and a good deal of it is the practical nitty-gritty of running a farm. But part of the upshot of this is that if you live a good life, and you behave morally toward other people, your reward will be the high regard of your neighbors and of the gods. And if you don't do that, then the converse is also true. And so this is sort of this is the selfish rationale for altruism. This is the selfish rationale for living a upright life. That there will be reward for it in the benevolence of your neighbors, in making the connections that leads to a good marriage, in having workers and slaves that respect you, and so forth and so on. And having the goodwill of the gods comes directly from your goodwill toward your community rather than selfishness and indolence. And so this is part of the idea of the civilization is about the needs of the community suppressing the selfish needs of the individual. This is where we can see Hesiod and Homer talking about the same kinds of things in a complementary way. Homer from the top of society and Hesiod from further down in a more common voice. The other thing about Works and Days, of course, is that there are a number of remarks in Works and Days that talk about women, and taking them at face value, they are part of the same strain of comments that we saw in Theogony, where Hesiod seems to take a dim view of womankind in general. But if you read Works and Days closely, what he says about women, once again, my interpretation, and your disagreement with this is to be assumed. My interpretation of this is that Hesiod's greatest castigation is for the male gender and its weakness, and the problems that men have with women. Some of them take advantage of that weakness and some do not. This is characteristic of humans, perhaps, more than of women. But I'm very interested to see your reactions to Hesiod, from Works and Days, and how Works and Days relates to what he says in the Theogony, in the comments in the forums. The articles for today are each very intriguing and have to do with female expression, the female participation in this cultural patronage of and emphasis on expression that I've been talking about. So the Heath article talks about the necessity of transmission, even of mythical storytelling within the home, as the women are engaged in the labors of the household, including the weaving that we see here in this engraving. They are sharing culture between them as part of what they're doing, and they transmit this to their children that are present in the household. So in other words, the storytelling that we get from the more visible documentary sources, like of male writers, Hesiod and Homer, and the playwrights of the classical period, and philosophers and historians. All of those that have come down to us, with a very prominent exception, are male. But this is sort of the public form of the transmission of culture, and there's a private avenue of cultural transmission as well that takes place within the home that women are an intrinsic part of. The prominent exception to the literature that we have is Sappho. Sappho is a female poet of Lesbos who engages in the development of this lyric poetry that I'm talking about, this exploration of subjective, intimate, personal, emotional expression as a counterpart to the grand and soaring themes of epic poetry. And so, what's interesting in the Mari article is how Mari is talking about the lyric poetry of Sappho having some of these same kinds of heroic elements that we see in epic poetry, even though it's expressed in an entirely different medium and form and level of intimacy. And then the Stigers talks more about the kind of vantage point that Sappho is working from and the nature of what she's trying to express in her poetry. So all of these are very interesting, and if you're at all interested in female expression, in writing about this for the paper, all of these articles might be of interest to you. So make sure that you get your proposal in to me today, day 7, January 12th. And if you have any questions about that, once again, please come to me. But this is an important part of preparing for the the rapidly approaching end of the semester. And don't forget that your representations and images paper is also due at the end of the week. So make sure that you set aside time, if you haven't already, to either go to the museum or to pick out and watch the film that you're going to see and look for the source material that goes along with it, and time also to actually write the paper. But as you're doing these things, think about what it is that the creator is trying to convey and what it is that the audience is responding to. If you're doing, either way, whether it's the film or the statues, or the sculpture, whatever, look for details in what is being expressed as you try to get at what this artist is trying to communicate and how that conveys some element of the ancient world that we're exploring.